Do you still believe nothing classified was shared?
Well, that's what I've heard. I don't know. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask the various people involved. I really don't know. What it was, we believe, is somebody that was on the line with permission, somebody that was with Mike Waltz, worked for Mike Waltz at a lower level, had, I guess, Goldberg's number or called through the app. And somehow this guy ended up on the call. Well, yeah, Mike Waltz, I guess he said he claimed responsibility, I would imagine. Had nothing to do with anyone else. It was Mike, I guess. I don't know. I was told it was Mike.
Thanks to National Security Advisor Michael Waltz and his Houthi PC small group chat, we've learned a lot this week about the ongoing U.S. military strikes in Yemen. We're also learning more about the various roles and locations of the members of that chat, and just about how out of the loop the commander-in-chief is when major life and death decisions are being made in this administration. Let's look at where all the major players were as this thing unfolded. On March 11th, the day Waltz apparently mistakenly sent a connection request on the Signal app to a reporter, he was in Saudi Arabia for talks on the war in Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also in Saudi Arabia, not just for the war negotiations, but to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to discuss ways to advance shared interests in the region. Around the same time, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was in meetings in Washington at the CIA headquarters with Director John Ratcliffe. And then there was Steve Witkoff, the real estate investor who serves improbably as Trump's Middle East envoy. On March 13th, Witkoff was in Moscow as Russian state TV showed his motorcade leaving the airport for a meeting with Vladimir Putin. At some point during his day in Moscow, he was added to the group chat, even though just days before, the National Security Agency put out a bulletin warning of vulnerabilities in the Signal app, saying Russian professional hacking groups were using those vulnerabilities to spy on encrypted conversations. Now, Witkoff says he didn't bring his phone on that trip. That same day, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard had just landed in Tokyo for a multinational tour, but she couldn't recall where she was when she started receiving the group texts.
Director Gabbard, you were also traveling during this discussion, correct?
Yes.
And where were you?
I was traveling through the Asia-Pacific region. I don't recall which country I was in at that time.
You don't remember the country?
I'd have to go back and look at the schedule.
The following day, March 14th, Vice President J.D. Vance was texting the group from an economic meeting in Michigan, saying he had reservations about the war plan, that he wasn't sure the president understood the full implications. Then came the day of the strike. That afternoon, Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg was sitting in his car in a supermarket parking lot in the D.C. area, staring at his phone in disbelief. He was the reporter who had been added to the group chat by Michael Waltz. And now he read a summary of the war plan from Hegseth, who told the group text the bombing would begin at 1:45 p.m. At that moment, Hegseth texted F-18 fighter jets from an aircraft carrier, as well as sea-based Tomahawk missiles and unmanned drones from an unknown base in the region, by the way, were headed for targets in Yemen. The Pentagon hasn't shared much information on its attacks there beyond saying that more than 30 targets were hit on the first day. The Houthis say those strikes killed 53 people, including women and children. Remember, according to Hegseth in the group text, a high-value target was struck in his girlfriend's apartment building, which was completely collapsed by the U.S. missiles. Vance replied to that text with a single word, excellent. You might be asking yourself, as all this was happening, where was the president? The, commander-in-chief of the United States forces, the man who's meant to make the final decision to launch a strike? Well, he was in West Palm Beach, Florida. His motorcade was recorded slipping into the gates of the Trump International Golf Club, which features 2 golf courses with 27 holes. Today, the White House released photos of Trump still in his golf attire, wearing a hat with his own signature on it, apparently listening in on the Yemen attack. None of this is how the American chain of command usually functions, or the way this is supposed to work, a way that has worked through, I think, multiple administrations of both parties. The national security principles don't text. They bring the recommendations to the president, who then makes a clear and unambiguous decision about the most consequential thing you can do as president. To risk the lives of American service members in an operation that will kill other people, including, in this case, it appears, many civilians who had the misfortune of just to be living in a building that we collapsed. I mean, everyone knows this from every movie you've ever seen, right? The go or no go, green light or not, right? You wait, the president gives a thumbs up or not. And it's obvious to all, thanks to these texts, the core thing that was supposed to happen in these decision-making procedures clearly did not happen. Instead, everything seemed to go backwards. Trump wanted action, and then his underlings tried to divine what he really wanted. Like when Vance texted the gang the morning of the strikes, quote, "I think we're making a mistake. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message, but I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now." Minutes later, Hegseth responded, quote, "We are prepared to execute, and if I had final go or no-go vote, I believe we should." But the thing is, he doesn't get that final vote. The president does. And then within minutes of that text, Waltz, who created the group, he adds in SM. That was Trump's White House aide, Stephen Miller, who then weighed in saying, "As I heard it, the president was clear, green light." Wait a second. As I heard it. He wasn't that clear if everyone's debating it. As I heard it, the president was clear. Couldn't have been that clear if you have to say, as I heard it, and people are debating what he said. And apparently there's no asking the president what he meant in the face-to-face meetings of the principals meeting. No getting the commander-in-chief to clearly state what he wants American service members to do. Just a bunch of people on a text chain trying to guess what the boss wants. As I heard it, he was clear. Was he clear? And then the argument's ended by a guy who's close to the president saying, "I'm pretty sure this is what he meant." This is just a colossal failure of everyone up to and including the president.